Hello, it's Ren Presents time. I'm your host, Ren, and today we continue with the third turn of the Shadow Tech goddess, Stenibelle. Chapter 3, Bolabungs and VUNKULAS. So, when last we dived into this little epic, Stenibelle was taken deep into the great Amenelos forest to the palatial estate of one Hannah-Ben Shurlamp, EVOR, a very noted and tenured professor at the University of D, a lady with Vith Bloodstein roots, and, on a personal note, possibly a criminal mastermind. Well noted for her intellect, which is well deserved, and also well noted for her ruthlessness, callousness, willingness to commit murder if she needs to with her army of henchmen. She's got money to throw around. She's got simoleons squirreled away everywhere. And to a person like Hannah-Ben Shurlamp, EVOR, Stenibelle is nothing. She is a tool, a means to an end. With her extensive reach, Hannah-Ben Shurlamp knows all about Stenibelle's Tyrolese sorceress skills, that she can seemingly turn invisible and evade even the most sophisticated of technological sensors and so forth. She knows of her ability to pick locks, and she knows of her ability also to have influence over men, because Stenibelle is a very attractive lady, very winsome, and can bend the ear of a man if need be. Hannah-Ben Shurlamp, EVOR, has gotten wind that the coordinates to Long Lost Camera, which is an old League homeworld 200,000 years prior, might be for the taking. Since 200,000 years is a hell of a long time, just think of how much shit is forgotten in 10 years, in 20 years. Things that were plain 10 or 15 years ago are lost sometimes. People die out. What was old and true becomes forgotten. So we're talking 200,000 years, and wherever camera is in the night sky is no longer known. But Hannah-Ben Shurlamp has heard that these creepy people, the Nihilists of Punt, or Punt, as Carol Phillips, who read Hannah-Ben Shurlamp's lines last week, pronounced it, they might have intel on the whereabouts of camera. And that intrigues Professor Shurlamp. She's all about accolades and awards and catered meals before a captive audience, everyone applauding and praising the name of the rediscoverer of places like Camera and Ing and Lemuria and the like. Very important to a scholar like Hannah-Ben Shurlamp. And if that information for this place is to be had, it is mission critical that she get it, and she wants Stenibelle to get it for her. The captain of the sprint ship, George Parr, is said to be underneath the surface, underneath his church-going facade, is a slavering Nihilist of Punt, trying to bring about the coming of the Shadow Tech goddess, the destroyer of the universe, to destroy the universe for him so that he may remake it in however manner he chooses. Destroying the universe, in my crazy world, is sort of like a forest fire. Forest fire rages through, burning everything down, but leaving fertile ground for new life to spring back up. And that's what he's after. And his compachos in the Nihilists of Punt want to remake the universe in any manner they see fit. And to do that, they need the Shadow Tech goddess. And apparently, on Long Lost Camera, is the way to bring the Shadow Tech Goddess here. The Hannah-Ben Shurlamp doesn't give two toots about the Shadow Tech Goddess or the end of the universe. She does care about Camera itself, its stellar positioning, so that she can be the rediscoverer of this world. And Stenibelle is gonna get her this information. Stenibelle is completely irrelevant, completely expendable. Go get me this info, and if you don't come up with it, don't come up at all. Stenibelle thought to refuse, and then she said, well, I'll just bankrupt your household, have all your sisters defrocked. I've got info on your father. I could have him put in jail. I could have you right back in jail right along with him, you know, and I can have your mother dug up from her grave and put in the stocks so that people can laugh at her skeleton. Ugh, that sounds disgusting, doesn't it? Hannah-Ben Shurlamp threatens her with all this stuff, and she also says, if you give in, if you do what I want, you get me this info, I will reconstitute your house. I will pay you very well. And I know of this dude out there who, if you marry him or one of your 29 sisters, take your pick, marries him, all league rules regarding heraldry and succession will be appeased, and the House of Belmont South Tyrol will continue. And that's very appealing to Stenibelle. So she agrees. She will do this mission for Hannah-Ben Shurlamp. Hannah-Ben wasn't very flattering for Stenibelle. She says, you know, you suck. You lost your chair on the Seeker because you had no tenaciousness. You weren't fierce. You weren't bold. You weren't inventive. Your seamanship sucked. Yada, yada, yada. And I've left you some tools in your room to compensate for these numerous shortcomings. And we will find out in this chapter what those shortcomings are. So let's proceed immediately. Stenibelle, Chapter 3, Bolabungs and VUNKULAS. She made the long, escorted walk back to her room, where once again she was locked inside. Lunch was waiting for her on the sitting table. Steaming hot soup of chicken, Rayard meat, a Tyrol delicacy, and rich Tyrol broth, a hot roll made of chewy bread, and a light salad. A coffee service with various creams and sugars sat to the side. Again, it was a lunch that was familiar to her, something that she might have easily ordered from a cafe for herself. Once again, Hannah-Ben Shurlamp was on her game, knowing her subject quite well. Stenibelle sat alone and ate. It was delicious. After lunch, she decided to explore her room a bit more. She went to the door and tried the latch. Locked. She examined it. Though the door appeared to be old and time-worn, its lock was expensive and sophisticated, a mag type, encoded and monitored, and surely would thwart most anybody attempting to crack it. She waved her hands and produced a small kit of various picks and other tools from thin air, more Tyrol sorcery Professor Shurlamp had touched upon. She guessed she could have this lock picked in under a minute, and in a manner that would thwart the remote monitoring. She'd always been good with her hands, even better at picking locks and moving in the shadows than Lyra, and way better than the thick-fingered Virginia. She waved her hands again and vanished the picks. She didn't bother to try it. Moving deeper into the room, she found a padded alcove sporting a massive canopy bed draped with the finest of fabrics. Past the alcove was a large bathroom, complete with a full bath and shower, enclosed commode, and a sauna. At the end of the room was a small terrace. Her room was situated somewhere in the craggy center of the manor. Battlements and crossing wings rose up all around past the terrace, creating a canyon of brick and ornamented mortar framed in both darkened and lit-up glass. She saw the manicured grounds, the elegant walkways, and the line of dense growth of the forest beyond, teeming with life, struggling and fighting, just waiting to retake these grounds and overgrow it. There were any number of sensing and monitoring devices trained down on her terrace, hidden in all the finery, but not escaping her eye. Any attempt to escape would immediately trigger an alarm. She wondered how a fade into the shadows would fare against all of Hannah-Ben Shurlamp's pretty technology. Certainly the professor knew she could do such a thing. Certainly she was prepared for it to some extent. She wondered, but wasn't interested enough to put it to the test. The professor had her interest piqued and loyalty bought. To save her house and restore their wealth. To be, at least in the professor's calculating eyes, vindicated. Even if her door had been unlocked and her terrace unwatched, she wouldn't have left. She was now, for good or ill, Hannah-Ben Shurlamp's employee, complete with a Seralcone set of instructions waiting to come bursting out. She stood on the terrace a bit longer, watching the evening fade in on the manor and forest beyond. She then returned to the interior of her room and began undressing for bed. As usual, getting the gown off by herself was rough sledding, it being slightly less awkward and confining than a straitjacket. "Hold still, will you, squirmy?" Virginia used to say. Eventually she was down to her linens and knickers. She removed her shoes and set them aside where dutiful mannequins came and took them away, brushing them off and sprinkling scented powder within. She mused what her male counterparts would do if they had to spend so long getting ready for each day and then breaking down again at the end of it. Probably wouldn't handle it well. She often favored her HRN in men's clothing. Those could be in and out of in 10 minutes. She seated herself at the vanity and removed her face, yet another time-absorbing labor. She dabbed on salves and liniments, cleaning her skin and discarding used pads and cotton tissues. Such labor. She thought of that crazy woman, Lady Alesta, a pilgrim of Marion who probably didn't spend 10 minutes a day grooming herself, though she recalled her being very pretty naturally. Sitting atop the vanity was a wooden chest that hadn't been there previously, and a small leather case. She set her cloth aside and opened the leather case. Inside was a small but intricate device. Her brains turned to cotton. Seralcone implanted information came up. It was a Unimind, an amazing elder device able to interface and extract information from any computerized source. There was nothing to it. Simply place the Unimind near the external source and it would do the rest. With it, she could send and receive information, store information from a variety of sources, and in some cases, take over less protected systems. Very handy. She slid it back into the case. She turned to the chest. Inside, sitting on a black velvet cushion, were 5 Bolabungs of the highest quality. Stenibelle had seen many Bolabungs in her day, had created many herself, but they are always crude, somewhat smelly contrivances. These here were ornately carved of ivory and microfine opals, and lined with hammered gold. She even thought she could see tiny indications of circuitry built into the ivory and gold with amazing workmanship. They were shaped into diamonds, stars, ovals, and other arcane shapes. Stenibelle was impressed. Bolabungs were, in most cases, haphazard devices made of wormwood or other sympathetic materials, such as gold, ivory, menthic, or amber, and were worn around the neck with a cord, usually of salt-rubbed leather. In their most basic form, they were intended to shield one's mind from telepathy and other sorts of unwanted mental intrusions. Most people carried at least one to provide them with a bit of privacy in the otherwise mentally verbose league. However, Bolabungs didn't stop there. They could do all sorts of things depending on their make and workmanship. They could shield one from arcane eyes, ward off the effects of menthols and spirits, deaden pain, slow terminal bleeding, and even prevent one from becoming pregnant, making those sorts of Bolabungs must-have for courtesans and other pliers of trades of the night. And there was one final thing Bolabungs could do. The fabulously expensive ones created by Bolabards of the highest skill could alter one's basic nature as desired. They could make a stupid man smart, or a cowardly man brave. They could coax witty words out of a dull man's mouth and transform a talentless wretch into an artist. Of course, such wonders were not cheap by any means, and they were not welcome either. Those bunged-up souls, once discovered, were disgraced in infamy forever as cheap frauds. And these 5 sitting on the black velvet looked to be just that, Bolabungs that could transform her into something she was not. A safeguard, courtesy her new benefactor and employer, Hannah-Ben Shurlamp. She got them out of the case and lined them up on the vanity. There was a mostly sapphire one inscribed with the 5th word, Abjanax. There was a lovely ochre one inscribed with Crixamp. There was a serpentine one of coiled beauty with Ventros. There was a garnet wonder inscribed with Verapones, and an imposing obsidian masterpiece with Fenvi. Stenibelle didn't know Vith, an odd language from the north of Vithland. She turned on a nearby hollow terminal and waited for it to come up. She should have known that there was a holographic image of Hannah-Ben Shurlamp standing there on the tabletop, dressed in white with hints of raven peeking through here and there, ready to assist her in performing her queries. She looked up the words and soon had a list. Abjanax, an idiomatic term with no direct translation in League Common. It meant, most literally, amnesia, but what it implied was to simply have the ability to quickly forget about a setback and continue on, to be persistent no matter what. Stenibelle had to admit that would be a handy one to have. Crixamp, a noun. Determination. Ventros, a noun. Ferocity. Verapone, a noun. Resourcefulness. Fenvi, a noun. Pugnaciousness. So, here they were, arcane Bolabungs covering the whole short list of all the virtues Hannah-Ben Shurlamp felt she was sorely lacking in. And again, Shurlamp's assessment appeared to be rather correct. She certainly wasn't overly resourceful, fierce, or pugnacious. She had allowed Lieutenant Gwendolyn Apprentice to board her ship without so much as a protesting whimper, without a cross word uttered in reprisal. Private Tara had wanted her to stand up to Gwendolyn, to fight her if need be. Truth be told, Stenibelle was frightened of the imposing Gwendolyn, and she meekly did as she was told, right in front of Aram and Tara. She didn't say 2 words to her as she strode onto the bridge to take command. She couldn't divine any way to get her stricken, scuttled ship away from Gwendolyn. What could she have done? There was no way she could have gotten out of it. "I thought you had something," Tara spat as she was led off in irons to face marine punishment for being AWOL. And Stenibelle certainly didn't have amnesia. She remembered it all and felt it just as much. Lieutenant Gwendolyn's haughty behavior certainly didn't help matters. She was far from a silent, professional fleet officer. She lectured Stenibelle and went out of her way to humiliate her, making Stenibelle's blood boil to that very day. Yet she couldn't muster the nerve to stand and fight back. Even in retrospect, she couldn't think of an alternative course of action, or think up something witty to say to Lieutenant Gwendolyn. Her wit failed her into submissive silence, even in her own head. So now, perhaps with these Bolabungs, she might be able to alter circumstances to her liking. Perhaps all bunged up, she could have gotten away from Gwendolyn and not been incarcerated. Aram and Tara, standing there watching her get frog-marched out of the dead bridge in irons. The humiliation, the guilt. She felt her stomach turn and her spirit sag. That was 7 months ago, but the memory was just as crushing now as it was then. But now, sitting in front of her was instant courage, instant resourcefulness, instant ferocity. The person these Bolabungs could turn her into. Imagine. But she had to be careful. These weren't wormwood trifles slathered in man scent to stroke the libido. These were Bolabungs of the highest quality and power, meant to alter her very personality, and they could harm her if worn improperly. Addiction could be an issue. She also wondered at the great black mark of dishonor her house would suffer should she be caught. She had to be careful and limit their use. She found some paper and quickly drew up a logbook marking the dates and times of their use, building in intervals of rest when she would remove them. She would stay on the safe side, wearing the Bolabungs for no longer than 3 hours at a time, and even less so when wearing all of them at once. If she stuck to the log, she should be fine. She crawled into bed and dimmed the lights, listening to the mannequins move about the room. In the morning, she would try the Bolabungs on and note it in her log. She closed her eyes and dreamed of her house. Belmont Manor on the hill by the sea. How she wished she could go home and see her sisters. Morning soon came. The mannequins gently nudged her awake. Autumn and John, Esquire, will be fetching you at 10 bells, one said in a musical voice. Your journey to Planetfall begins promptly at 11 bells. Breakfast will be served you aboard the Hannah-Ben Knight. She clambered out of bed and had a refreshing shower. Drying and donning her knickers, she seated herself at the boudoir and annotated in her logbook. 8 bells, tested Bolabungs for 15 minutes. It was time to give them a try, to see if they made her feel sick or addled her constitution. Then she would remove them after 15 minutes and continue dressing. Stenibelle opened the chest and took the Bolabungs, all 5 of them, and put them on, situating her mass of black hair over their leather cords. The charms clinked together and settled at her breast. The effect was immediate. It was a revelation. She had thought the Bolabungs would make her feel sick. On the contrary, she felt strong. She felt invincible. The sickening feeling of the events 7 months ago were suddenly gone, suddenly had no meaning. Gone was the indecision. Gone was the pain. So she went into space and failed. So what? So some of her sisters were embarrassed by the incident. What were they doing to preserve the house? Nothing. So she was handcuffed and made sport of. She was wronged by an uncaring fleet and an oaf of a lieutenant. Gwendolyn, Lady Apprentice. Stenibelle's blood boiled. How dare she set foot aboard her ship that she paid for, and how dare she presume to lecture her? I should have had you on the ground, screaming for mercy. Tara was right. I should have knocked your teeth out. Before she knew what was happening, Stenibelle had her fist through the mirror, the broken shards of silver glass raining down all over. Wheeled mannequins came in a hurry to attend to the broken glass. She went to the bathroom and washed her bleeding hand. Small cuts, nothing to be concerned about. All bunged up, finally free of the haunting memories of the past, she was eager to leave the confined environments of Hannah-Ben Shurlamp's manor. Planetfall awaited. The place ought to be a veritable paradise for her, full of dark alleys and unsavory types, to test out the new, ruthless, uncaring Stenibelle. Everything she had done previously was for her house, for Belmont, South Tyrol, for her father and her sisters. Now it was time to do for herself, to build her own fortune and reputation, to not care about her heritage or Belmont Manor that she had dreamed of so fondly the night before. Perhaps Hannah-Ben Shurlamp would be proud of what she had created. She got out her HRN in men's clothes and sorted through all of her things. From the hidden interior of the HRN came an assortment of items the officials at Hagthorpe had never found. She waved her hand, and there were her marzible daggers, black and ornate, ready for use. She moved her hands again, and it was gone. Another shake, and she had 6 nested daggers between her fingers, gleaming and ready to kill. A final shake, and they were gone. Digging further into the hidden contents of her coat were a number of holy stones of various colors, a few silvery devices designed to detect and counter the arcane, and a Grenville .40 pistol that she used in place of her ints, which didn't function. As with everything, Professor Shurlamp seemed to know Stenibelle made use of a Grenville 40, as there was a box of ammunition for it conspicuously placed in the closet. She loaded up and made the box vanish. She packed everything back up, dressed, and was ready to go. On the bell, Ottoman John knocked on the door. "I see you are kitted out in your usual attire," he said. "Though you are dressed as a man, you are still a very attractive lady." Stenibelle took the compliment and responded. "You have no chance, sir," she said. Ottoman absorbed that. "I see. The Hannah-Ben Knight shall be your transport to Planetfall, all expenses paid and first-class booking, of course. It will shortly be in position, and we shall upload you to it with all speed. Once there, you will be served breakfast. However, before that happens, we have one final stop to make. Please, if you would kindly accompany me." "How about the professor? Will she see me off?" Stenibelle asked. "No, my lady." They exited the room, Stenibelle's logbook sitting on the boudoir, forgotten. Ottoman John led her down several corridors until they arrived at a Baroque door. He produced a set of keys and opened it. "After you," he said, bowing. Stenibelle entered the room and was immediately taken aback. Inside was a long table covered with oblong boxes. The boxes were all open, with the lid to each box fitted underneath like a shoebox. Festive, brightly colored tissue paper blossomed from each box. Stenibelle took a glance. Within each open box, wreathed in pastel paper, was a VUNKULA, the Los Capricos weapon of House Grenville. Ottoman John spoke as Stenibelle took in the staggering wealth that was presented before her, for VUNKULAs were costly in the extreme. "Professor Shurlamp knows of your proficiency with this weapon, and as she is invested in your success, she bids you take one of your choice." Stenibelle feasted her eyes on the dormant hints of golden links and glints of jewels peeking out of the paper, awaiting discovery. "These are priceless." "Of course they are. This is a gift from your generous benefactor." She stepped down the line, perusing the boxes. Stenibelle saw VUNKULAs of all shapes and sizes, big ones, small ones, gilded ones, cruel, warlike examples, and many with multiple tails. The VUNKULA was a sturdy belt that went around the waist. Attached to the center of the belt was a metal tail made of forged, interlocking links. They averaged anywhere from 3 to 8 feet long at full stretch and were tipped with a variety of barbs, hooks, points, arrows, and other club-like constructions. Each VUNKULA was unique. The interior of the belt was lined with fragments of the Mind Stone, and thus when worn, a skilled practitioner could bring the tail portion to life, moving like a prehensile monkey's tail. The most common usage of the weapon was to keep it hidden within one's clothing. When needed, it could be dipped into a variety of substances kept in hidden pockets, and then strike in the blink of an eye, inflicting a deadly blow. A proper VUNKULA attack was a lightning strike, the victim never seeing it come or go. Lord Giron of Grenville, a former suitor of mine, once gave me a VUNKULA for my birthday, and he taught me how to use it as well, she said. It was just a little one. He must have thought much of you to offer such a gift. You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen, Belle. He liked me well enough. The gift was gone. It had helped pay for her trial. Lord Giron was gone too. Her scandal had been too much for the stately Grenville to bear. Your letters have all been returned, Belle, Virginia told her. Professor Shurlamp knows all about it, Ottoman John said. Select any of your choosing, but please make haste. We must to the Hannah-Ben Knight within the hour. It was like standing in a butcher shop perusing all the choice cuts of meat, her mouth watering at the gorgeous selections. Stenibelle ignored the smaller, daintier ones of light materials encrusted with decorative jewels, clearly made for ladies and for stabbing necks, focusing instead on the bigger, brutish, more warlike ones for men, made to break necks. She wanted one that was big enough for her to attack at a distance, to use it like a third fist. she found what she was looking for. In a box bursting with teal paper was a pugnacious one made of cockspur, a very hard and durable metal from Hannah-Ben. She pulled it out of the box. It was tipped with a Hannah-Ben battle club, a rudimentary 3-fingered hand that could open and close into a fist. Very useful. She had found the perfect one. "I think that one might be too big for you, my lady," Ottoman John said. "Rubbish! It's perfect," she replied. Stenibelle removed her sash and strapped the belt on. As it settled, she felt the tail come under her control, ready for her command. As Ottoman John had said, it was too long for her small stature, the club dragging on the floor. She concentrated and recalled Lord Guerin patiently teaching her its use. The tail shuddered and then lifted from the floor and came to eye level. The hand at the end of the tail turned and the fingers opened and closed. She noticed a small glyph sticking out of Ottoman John's coat pocket. She extended the tail in his direction and gently plucked the glyph from his pocket, showed it to him, and then offered it back. "Very precise control, Lady Stenibelle. I'm impressed," he said, taking his glyph. She coiled the tail up and it vanished under the folds of her HRN. She covered the VUNKULAS belt with her green sash, replaced her ince, and was ready to go. "Shall we?" she said, and they retired from the room. "I'm starving. I wish to be served something raw." She was led out to the primordial commotion of the yard and into a waiting rip car. Soon she was in her room aboard the Hannah-Ben Knight, on her way to Planetfall, seething to get started. And with that, we conclude Chapter 3, Bolabungs and VUNKULAS. The Bolabung has been around in the League of Elder for a while. Usually it's just a wooden charm, and it's usually been smeared with a salve of some sort. You can use it, usually, since most people are telepathic in the League, and some people want a little mental privacy. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't want somebody dipping into your head at any random moment. Most of them are just made to kind of block out telepathy so you can have some privacy in your own head. That's the most general use of a Bolabung. They can also do other things, like they can keep you from getting drunk, or they can keep you from getting pregnant. In the Bloodstein books, if you've read that series, Sam is a Monomoh, and Monomos are incredibly fecund, so if Sam got pregnant, she'd punch out 12, 15 kids at a pop. So she has her baby bung, as she calls it, a Bolabung that, when worn, prevents her from becoming pregnant. So she uses that a lot, as she and Kay are having sex a lot. And Bolabungs can do other things, as we said. They can alter your basic personality, making you into something that you're not. But the ones like that are dangerous to use because they can addict you. They can destroy your mind, basically. Stenibelle had created a logbook to monitor the dates and times when she used it, to make sure she didn't overuse it. But as soon as she put these Bolabungs on, she was overwhelmed with the feelings of power. All the guilt and sadness she had felt for the trial, gone, replaced with anger and roiling hatred, especially for Lady Gwendolyn of Prentice. And Stenibelle is just oozing with newfound feelings and newfound desires, and she can't wait to get to Planetfall to try out the new Stenibelle, and forgetting all about the little logbook she had created. Stenibelle, wearing all of these potent Bolabungs all the time, is actually in great peril. These things can kill her, and we will see next chapter how Stenibelle deals with these Bolabungs, if she's completely lost to them, as she's carried away and becomes a completely unrecognizable person. It's important to not lose yourself in any of these processes, to feel guilt, to feel humiliated. Those feelings can be, though painful, can teach you a valuable lesson, and just to forget about them is bad. That those feelings can build you as a person. If you properly control them, properly utilize these feelings, they can make you into a better person. So Stenibelle's being artificially bolstered up by these devices, these Bolabungs, and that can be bad. She's not growing as a person when she's got them on, and in fact, she's in mortal peril. Also, the VUNKULA is a Los Capricos weapon of the House of Grenville. I introduced it way back in Book 1 of the League of Elder. The Grenvilles were rivals and enemies of the Blanchfords, and the Blanchfords' Los Capricos weapon, a weapon that is specific to one house. Theirs was the Karg. It's like a sword-like weapon. It's like a tube, but it's a sword. It functions as a sword. Captain Davidge's Karg, he always uses more than his gun. Yeah, it's just how it is. Kay had his magical silver tech infused Karg and so forth. But the House of Grenville uses the VUNKULA. And I remember when I was a kid, I learned in elementary school about a cult called the Oneidas in New York. According to their teachings, if you lived a certain way, you followed the tenets of the cult, of the religious sect, you would eventually grow a tail with a hand at the end called the glory hand. And I always remembered that tail and being, that would be cool. So I created the VUNKULA. It's like a belt with a tail with like a hand at the end, or it can be a hand or a hook or a club. It can be any number of things, and people usually keep it coiled up in their clothes, and when they want to, they can flash that thing out like a scorpion's tail and get you in the neck. And usually they'll have little hidden pockets with knockout powder or sleeping powder or whatever, any number of things. And it's supposed to be so fast you don't even see it coming or going. You're just boom, pricked in the neck, and that's it. Up to this point, Stenibelle is handicapped greatly than her male counterparts. Her male counterparts are big and strong. They have the full It Man powers. They can fly with you can use TK. They can do a lot. And Stenibelle doesn't have those abilities necessarily, but in this case of the VUNKULA, she can do something that her male counterparts cannot do. They were not trained in how to use a VUNKULA, but she was. She had a suitor, Lord Guerin of Grenville, who was a suitor for her hand. Had the seeker thing not happened, she probably would have married Lord Guerin, but the shame, the infamy of her trial, the prestige or lack of prestige it brought to Stenibelle was too much for him, and he disavowed her like most of her sisters did. And he taught her how to use the VUNKULA, and he even gave her a small one that was very valuable, and she had to sell it to help pay for her trial. But Stenibelle is a master of the VUNKULA, and she picked a big one, like a one for a big guy, big heavy one with a war club at the end of it, but she keeps coiled up in the folds of her HRN, and she's going to be using this VUNKULA a lot. And like she said, she wanted a long one that she could use like a third fist, and she will make, you even see it on the cover. Carol kind of went overboard on how long she made it, but that's the VUNKULA. That is the VUNKULA there. That big tail coming out of her back is that. Some people think I took the tail from Dr. Octopus, Spider-Man's villain, but no, it was the Oneidas, the cult in New York. That's what I took it from. Anywho, we will see how this story progresses. Stenibelle, all bunged up, is just waiting to go to Planetfall and test out these new skills she's got on the unwary populace of Planetfall. And next chapter, chapter 4, is Planetfall. Specifically, Hoffman Plate. So Planetfall is a humongous gas giant. There's really no place to stand on Planetfall because it's mostly just gas until you get into the crushing interior, and then you're dead. But there are 3 man-made continents, basically, that float in the upper atmosphere where they mine all of the trace gases and so forth. That's the main industry of Planetfall, is elemental gas. And there's 3 of them. There's Deckard, Z-Enkar, and Hoffman Plate. And so Hoffman Plate is where they are headed. And we'll see how Stenibelle reacts to all this and how much peril she's actually in wearing these bunkulas all the time, and how she reacts and becomes a very different person, a shadow of herself, a very vile person, in fact. We will see next week. Until then, this is Ren Presents. I am your host, Ren. Peace out.